Have you ever, like, watched someone, maybe even yourself, actually, who is just perfectly polite in a coffee shop, and then they turn into this raging, red-faced monster the absolute second they start their engine?
Oh, yeah, it's wild to witness.
Right. I mean, it is a literal modern-day Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde transformation. You hold the door for a stranger on the sidewalk, but like 5 minutes later, you are screaming at someone through a windshield because they didn't accelerate fast enough at a green light.
And we all do it, or at least we've all felt it.
Exactly. So today, our mission for this deep dive is to explore exactly that. Why does the car trigger this sudden, intense, almost terrifying anger that we universally know as road rage?
We treat this phenomenon like a punchline most of the time, like a quirky part of modern commuting.
Yeah, totally.
But when we actually look at the underlying mechanics, it reveals a profound amount about, well, human psychology, evolutionary biology, and honestly, how we process our daily lives.
It's so true. And to guide us through this, we are unpacking two really compelling sources today.
Mhm.
The first is this deeply reflective piece by a writer named Gursley Kiss, and he recounts these incredibly raw, unfiltered stories from a men's support circle.
Which are just fascinating to read.
They really are. And the second source is a transcript from a WFAA local news broadcast. It features a doctor who analyzes the deep-rooted psychological and physiological causes of road violence.
Right.
So to really understand this Jekyll and Hyde transformation, I feel like we first have to look at what the physical environment of the car itself does to our brains.
What's fascinating here is the psychological concept called de-individuation.
De-individuation, okay.
Right. So when you slide into the driver's seat and you close that door, you are suddenly encased in thousands of pounds of glass and metal.
Yeah, you're in your own little bubble.
Exactly. It's a closed, climate-controlled micro environment, and it creates this immediate, pervasive sense of anonymity.
Huh.
The brain actually begins to treat the car like a protective shell, like a literal suit of armor.
Okay, let's unpack this because, I mean, calling it armor makes it sound like we are gearing up for a medieval battle, not just picking up dry cleaning.
Right.
So Gru is driving basically the physical equivalent of an anonymous internet comment section.
That is such a good way to put it. Yeah.
It's because you have a screen or, well, a windshield between you and the rest of the world, so the social consequences just evaporate.
The parallel to the internet is incredibly accurate. I mean, for 99% of human history, our brains evolved in environments where if you were close enough to shout at someone,
You were close enough to get punched.
exactly, you were close enough to suffer immediate physical or social consequences. You could be ostracized from the tribe.
Right, right.
The car completely short circuits that evolutionary programming. And the WFAA news broadcast actually touches on this directly.
Oh, yeah. The doctor in the
And
segment, right?
yeah. He notes that because we are physically separated by these massive vehicles and we aren't face to face, we feel safe to act bold. The biological threat of retaliation is just removed.
Well, let me push back on that slightly.
Sure.
Isn't traffic just genuinely, objectively infuriating? I mean, being trapped behind someone going 10 miles under the speed limit while you are running late, that feels inherently enraging.
Oh, absolutely. It's stressful.
Right. So is the car actively tricking our brains into being meaner, or is the situation itself just uniquely terrible?
Well, the situation is stressful, but the environment of the car actively degrades your capacity for empathy.
Really? Just by being in it?
Yeah. Because of that armor, the speed we're traveling, the physical structure of the road, we literally stop seeing the other drivers as human beings.
Wow.
We are deprived of the micro-expressions, the eye contact, the body language that our brains rely on to trigger compassion.
So they just become objects.
Exactly. You no longer see a stressed-out mother, an exhausted nurse, or a nervous teenager learning to drive. Your brain simply registers a metal box blocking your path. You only see obstacles.
And the research in the sources backs up just how incredibly common this trick of the brain is. I mean, an American study found that 96% of drivers lose control at least once a year.
Almost everyone.
Almost every single person does it.
Yeah.
You, me, the listener, right now, we have all been that monster behind the wheel.
And if 96% of people are experiencing this, the car is doing a phenomenal job of removing our social filters.
Yeah, clearly.
But if the car is simply the suit of armor that removes the mask, the obvious question is, what exactly are we armoring ourselves against?
Right. What's spilling out?
Yeah, what is spilling out of us when that filter drops?
Well, according to the stories from the men's circle in Gursley Kiss's piece, what spills out is rarely ever about the car. And it's almost never actually about the traffic.
No, it's displaced anger.
Exactly. Displaced anger. It is the accumulation of everything a person has swallowed, suppressed, and just ignored during their entire day, finally finding an exit wound.
The setting of that men's circle is incredibly revealing for this. You have 10 men sitting in a room, in a circle, in total silence.
Sounds intense.
It is. And when the facilitator asks the group about losing their patience in traffic, the immediate reaction is just nervous laughter.
Because they all know.
They all instantly recognize the truth of it.
The specific stories Kiss shares really bring the weight of this to life. Like, there is this guy named Balazs, who is 43 years old, and he describes his daily routine as essentially one long, exhausting performance of politeness.
Which so many people can relate to.
Oh, for sure. From the moment he wakes up, he is compromising. He smiles at difficult clients. He nods at his colleagues. He is perfectly respectful to a boss who perhaps doesn't respect him.
He's just absorbing it all.
Right. Throughout the day, he is building up this massive reservoir of tension because he cannot safely say what he actually thinks or feels without risking his livelihood.
Yeah, he spends 8 to 10 hours a day tightly regulating his nervous system, right? Compressing all his authentic reactions into this tiny, socially acceptable box.
And then he walks to the parking lot.
And gets into his vehicle.
He gets into the car, and someone 3 lanes over fails to use a turn signal. A totally mundane, everyday traffic annoyance.
Right.
And Balazs absolutely detonates. He lays on the horn, he shouts at the windshield, he grips the steering wheel so hard his knuckles turn white.
It's all that pent-up energy.
Yes. He uses that piece of plastic and metal to violently release the held-back tension from his entire day. And then, of course, the shame washes over him.
The physical intensity of that release is really mirrored in another story from the circle, too.
Oh, tell a story.
Yeah, Attila. He's a 38-year-old father, and he found himself stuck in traffic for 40 minutes while running desperately late for his daughter's kindergarten performance.
Which is already a nightmare scenario.
Totally. And the car in front of him hesitates at a green light. Not for a minute. For 2 seconds.
2 seconds.
And he lost his mind. He started honking and yelling like an absolute catastrophe had just occurred.
He admits to the circle that he almost got out of his car to start a physical fight over a 2-second delay.
It's terrifying when you think about it.
But the detail that genuinely gave me chills was what happened next. Attila finally arrives at the kindergarten. His daughter runs up to him, beaming, asking how he liked her performance.
Yeah.
He smiles back at her, playing the role of the happy, supportive dad. But underneath his clothes, his entire body is physically shaking with adrenaline.
The physiological reaction happening in Attila's body in that moment is crucial to understand.
What's actually happening to him biologically?
Well, when that trigger hits in the car, the biological cascade is instantaneous. Within 2 seconds, your heart rate skyrockets, your muscles involuntarily tense up.
Wow.
A massive surge of cortisol and adrenaline floods your bloodstream. Your body is, quite literally, preparing to engage in mortal combat.
Over a green light.
Exactly. Combine that biological cocktail with a bad day at the office, underlying financial stress, or just a lack of sleep, and an explosion is virtually guaranteed.
Here's where it gets really interesting to me. Our bodies literally believe we are going to war over a 2-second delay at a traffic light.
Yeah.
That is a massive, irrational biological overreaction. Why does the brain choose the car as the designated battlefield? Why is this the one place we feel we can unleash that kind of fight response?
It comes back to the concept of control. Think about Balazs smiling through his teeth at his boss, or Attila feeling helpless as the clock ticks down.
Right. They have no control in those situations.
Exactly. For people who feel overworked, silenced, or fundamentally helpless in their daily lives, the car represents the ultimate undisputed space of control.
Your own personal kingdom.
When you get behind the wheel, you are the absolute master of your domain. You decide the speed, you pick the lane, you control the climate, the volume of the radio, the direction of travel.
You are the unchallenged king of your little glass and metal castle.
So when another driver suddenly cuts into your lane or forces you to brake, it registers in the brain as a threat.
Ah, I see.
The WFAA broadcast points out that this triggers a deeply primitive emotion. It feels intensely territorial.
Oh, the doctor's quote from the transcript. He phrases it perfectly. He says, quote, "You just cut me off and I feel like you took something that I need to go get."
Yes. It bypasses the logical prefrontal cortex entirely. It stops being about a minor inconvenience and becomes a direct, primal invasion of your territory and your autonomy.
It transforms from, You slow down my commute to you disrespected my domain, and I have to defend it.
Exactly.
And because we are in that de-individuated state, wearing our metal armor, safe from a literal fistfight, we unleash hell.
We let it all out.
But as we move from the internal biology to the external reality, we hit a really sobering part of this deep dive. We treat road rage like a private, isolated pressure valve. But it is rarely a solo performance. There is very often collateral damage sitting quietly in the back seat.
The silent audience.
Yes, the children. They're strapped into their car seats, quietly watching this terrifying Dr. Jekyll to Mr. Hyde transformation happen to the people they rely on for survival.
Deirdre Kiss's piece makes a profound observation about this dynamic. A child's primary method of learning is observation.
Right. They're like sponges.
They are constantly absorbing your behavioral templates. They watch how you navigate frustration. They hear the sudden, violent volume of your shouting. They see the aggression in your posture.
That's so heavy.
They are learning, in real time, the acceptable mechanics of processing and expressing anger.
There is a heartbreaking story from a man named Peter in the source material. He was driving with his 9-year-old son in the back seat.
Yeah, I remember this one.
They got stuck behind someone, driving a bit cautiously.
Yeah.
And suddenly, from the back seat, this little 9-year-old boy yells out, "Come on, move, you idiot."
Wow.
Yeah. And Peter checks the rearview mirror, expecting his son to look angry, but his son is grinning.
He was proud of himself.
Immensely proud, because he had just perfectly mimicked his father's behavior.
The shock of seeing your own worst impulses reflected back at you in the face of your child is a devastating realization for a parent.
If you are a parent listening to this, or an aunt, an uncle, an older sibling, this completely reframes the issue. It's not just a bad habit.
No, it's not.
The story that truly drove this home was about a man named Saba. He is 51 years old today. Growing up, he was terrified of riding in the car because his father used to shout and rage endlessly behind the wheel.
Which leaves a lasting mark.
Saba remembers sitting in the passenger seat, physically trembling, shrinking into the upholstery. He made a solemn promise to himself that he would never, ever subject a child to that kind of fear.
He understood the trauma firsthand.
Exactly. And yet, 30 years later, someone pulls out in front of him on the highway. Saba snaps out of a daze to find himself flashing his brights, leaning heavily on the horn, absolutely raging at the windshield. He turns his head, and his own son is sitting right next to him watching. 30 years later, the cycle repeated itself flawlessly. Road rage isn't just a bad habit. It's being passed down like a toxic family heirloom.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, this generational cycle perfectly illustrates a much deeper, more insidious emotional pattern that Kiss identifies in his work.
What kind of pattern?
Well, for many people, and he notes this is particularly prevalent in traditional male upbringings, there is an incredibly rigid, unspoken set of rules governing human emotion.
Like boys don't cry, that sort of thing.
Exactly. In many families, sadness is viewed as a fundamental weakness. Fear is considered shameful. Crying is completely forbidden.
So if you are exhausted or overwhelmed or terrified of losing your job, but you aren't allowed to express any of those vulnerable emotions, what is left?
Anger. Anger becomes the absolute only acceptable, culturally permitted emotion that you are allowed to express. All that sadness, all that fear, all that quiet desperation gets tightly bottled up. It gets painted over with a thick layer of aggression, and it gets released in the only environment that feels consequence-free, the car.
That makes so much sense.
It demonstrates the incredible danger of raising kids in environments where anger is the sole acceptable outlet for psychological pain.
The car essentially functions as a socially acceptable crying room for people who aren't allowed to cry.
That's exactly what it is.
You think you are just furious at a red light, but you are actually violently expressing a lifetime of unallowed sadness. So what does this all mean? Now that we understand the deep psychological architecture of this problem, you know, the evolutionary trick of the armor, the displaced tension, the adrenaline spikes, the generational patterns, how do we actually rewire our reaction?
Well, both of our sources push towards specific solutions, resting on two main pillars: personal accountability and the active, intentional practice of empathy.
The WFAA broadcast leans heavily on the accountability side. The docker argues that the baseline recipe for safety on the roads requires intelligence, mutual respect, and strict personal accountability.
Right. Taking ownership of your actions.
Let me push back on this practically. It is so incredibly easy to sit here in a calm room with a cup of coffee and say, just be mindful, Be accountable.
Sure, in theory, it's easy.
But we just discussed the biology of this. When that 2-second adrenaline spike hits and your body is flooded with cortisol because someone invaded your territory, how do you actually stop yourself from laying on the horn? You can't just think your way out of a nervous system response in real time.
You are absolutely right, which is why the most powerful, actionable steps from Gurjali Kiss's piece are preventative, not reactive.
Preventative.
You cannot wait until the adrenaline is in your bloodstream. He advocates for a practice he calls taking exactly 1 minute of silence in the car before you even touch the ignition,
Wait, just sitting in the driveway for 60 seconds?
before you start the engine. You get in, you close the door, and you sit. You take deep, intentional breaths.
And that actually helps.
Biologically, yes. This activates the parasympathetic nervous system. It forces your heart rate to slow down. It actively clears the residual cortisol from the argument you had with your boss, or just the general stress of the workday.
Oh, I see.
You are intentionally leaving the tension outside the vehicle. The phrase he uses is vital. 1 minute of silence is often worth more than 20 minutes of anger on the road. You have to consciously downregulate your nervous system before you put on the armor.
Because if you don't empty that cup of stress before you put the car in drive, the very first person who merges slightly too close to your bumper is going to get 8 hours of displaced frustration dumped directly onto them.
Precisely. And once you are actually moving, the next mechanism for rewiring the brain is to actively force empathy back into the equation.
How do you do that at 60 miles an hour?
Well, the research highlights how rapidly our compassion returns the moment a human signal disrupts the de-individuation.
Oh, the stickers.
Yes.
The source material brought up things like baby on board magnets or student driver, please be patient signs.
Exactly. When drivers see those, or if they just happen to catch a clear glimpse of the other person's face through the glass, their aggression instantly drops. The human cue short-circuits that obstacle mindset.
It shatters the illusion of the armor. You are no longer defending your territory against a faceless machine. You are dealing with a terrified 16-year-old learning how to merge, or an exhausted new parent running on 2 hours of sleep.
It changes everything.
Kiss suggests that if you feel the territorial anger building, you should actively engage your imagination to humanize the other car. Make up a narrative.
Right. Force yourself to imagine their situation.
Force yourself to imagine that the person who just cut you off is a father frantically rushing to his child's kindergarten performance, just like Attila from the men's circle.
Fictionalizing a human story cools the biological anger instantly. That is a brilliant mental hack.
It really is.
And Kiss goes beyond just the mechanics of the commute. He insists on addressing the root cause by speaking your feelings out loud in your actual life.
Like at home.
Yeah. If you had a difficult, humiliating, or exhausting day, you have to find a way to verbalize that to a partner, a friend, or even just a journal. Feelings that are processed and spoken out loud in the living room are significantly less likely to violently explode on the interstate.
That makes total sense.
He advocates strongly for seeking deeper self-awareness, whether through therapy, coaching, or joining support environments like the men's circles he facilitates. Uncontrolled aggression behind the wheel is almost never about driving. It is the visible surface of a much deeper well of unresolved psychological weight.
Wow.
This raises an important question, one that Kiss uses to challenge his readers directly. Does your driving reveal the true condition of your soul?
Oh, man. That is a remarkably heavy thought.
It is a deeply uncomfortable concept to sit with. But if you find yourself constantly enraged, constantly screaming at strangers, constantly attacking other human beings from the safety of your steel cage, you have to ask yourself what that level of hostility reflects about your internal world.
It perfectly synthesizes the incredible journey we have taken through these sources today. The big transformative takeaway here is that the car is not actually making you angry.
No, it's not.
The car is simply a mirror. It is reflecting back to you the tension, the helplessness, the exhaustion, and all the unsaid words that you have been silently carrying around all day long.
It acts as an amplifier for whatever is already inside you. Once we understand that biological and psychological trick, we strip the car of its power to turn us into monsters. We regain our agency and our personal accountability.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into the human mind on the highway, I want to leave you, the listener, with a final thought to mull over. The next time someone cuts you off in traffic, instead of instantly gripping the wheel and asking what is wrong with them, try to pause for 1 second and ask yourself, what am I carrying today that is making me so angry?
That's a powerful shift.
And I want you to imagine this. What if our car suddenly had no doors, no roofs, and no tinted glass? If you were completely physically exposed and you were forced to look every single person directly in the eye every time you drove, how much of your daily road rage would simply vanish into thin air?